The New Jersey Latino Roundtable has been made possible by Insider NJ and the Latino Spirit. Insider NJ is committed to giving serious political players a fair hearing and an interactive and dynamic forum for ideas, discussion, and political intelligence. Find Insider NJ at insidernj.com and Insider NJ in all social media. The Latino Spirit is New Jersey's leader in connecting government, corporations, and nonprofits to Spanish speaking audiences throughout the Garden State with empowering public media. New Jersey is the Latino Spirit. Find the Latino Spirit in all social media at the Latino Spirit and at thelatinospirit.com.
I started at a very young age. I was actually very involved in our local democratic organization. Actually, before I even turned the legal age of voting, I was like 17 years old and I was doing like community grassroots volunteering. And back then, the spirit of volunteering was really volunteering. Nobody ever got paid or anything like that. I did that for years. Long story short, and fast forward, I was very involved. I became a county committee person. I became a municipal leader. I was very engaged in the local GOTV operations, making sure that we were helping to elect folks. So I became a campaign manager for a lot of our local candidates, mostly mayors, congressional members and what have you. So I did that for, oh my goodness, for almost 22 years before a light bulb went and said, you know what? I'm really good at getting other people elected. Let me give it a try. I never really ever wanted to run for office. I was really happy doing what I was doing. And it just clicked.
And so you got that from within yourself?
I did. Well, it happened. An opportunity came up, and that opportunity was back then, as you can remember. Pasquale was both the mayor of Patterson as well as an assembly member, and he wanted to become the congressman. So when that opening came up for the assembly, there were two. People were vying for the mayoralship. I was not interested in that. I was interested in going to the assembly. Had never been elected to office before, though. It was my first and only time getting elected, and that was in the assembly, and I went for it, and I was elected. I was obviously the first Latina, first Puerto Rican woman, first woman in my district to represent the 35th Legislative District.
And you were the first Latina in the assembly?
No, first Latina in the 35th District.
I
was the second. I was
Nilsa Cruz Perez.
Yeah,
okay.
Nilsa was in the assembly back then,
cool.
and so I was the second. She really was.
You too, with doing what you did.
But Nilsa was, she was really great.
You don't remember this, but early on you said to me when I just got in, we were in Jersey City somewhere. I think it was for the Hispanic law. And so we were both serving on a thing, and she pulls me to the side.
Oh, at Rutgers University?
No, it was at a hotel.
Yeah, yes.
And she says to me, just make sure you raise a lot of money. And I was like, but Nellie, I hate doing that.
I know.
I hate fundraising. But he who has the goal makes his decision.
But I tell you, that's the whole point of raising your own money and being able to do that and do it to the point where you become very independent, to being able to do it. That to me is so important because you want to follow the democratic process, and we're loyal, right? We're good soldiers. But having that independence of being able to raise your own money and not depend on any, one having to pull one way or the other, to me is, it's an opportunity to not only be able to lead, and also be a partner.
Right.
And I can do it both very comfortably. So.
But I met you when you worked at Congressman, was it Klein?
So I was asked to be the Congressman Herb Klein's district director. Yes.
I remember that.
Wow, that's
actually. So I first met you.
Yes. That we were in a campaign.
I was chief of staff for Ray Lesniak at that time.
Okay.
And then I met you when I actually came to work at Governor's Council again.
But I thought we met before that. No?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No, so I didn't hold any elected office similar to you prior to joining the Senate seat, but I was very much engaged with the Northward Democratic Party and then became the vice chair of the Essex County Democratic Party and have served alongside 3 phenomenal chairs in my tenure of time there. And I actually got started, and you'll appreciate the stories. There was a district leader race, and 2 people randomly knocked on my door, and I think I was home from college or just coming home from college at the time, and I just felt like it was very suspect that they wanted us to go out, and so instead I mobilized my neighbors to go out and vote against the slate that the Northward Democratic Party was running. And then that was my really foray, because they wanted to find out who was this woman who in 10 minutes got 15 people to the polls and made our lives miserable. And so then I, it was a long story after that, but got asked to joined the Northward Democratic Party, where I had very vociferous and passionate conversations when we had our meetings, but ultimately led to a space where I would jump into public office, and like you never wanted to. I actually swore off running for public office when Joe ran for county executive, because our primary race was so terrible and negative that I was like, I just cannot do this. And then I remember when Hillary Clinton, and I don't know in what capacity, she came to talk to the Democratic Party, and I wasn't elected, and she spoke, and for 2 seconds after that I was like, I could do this, and then just let the idea fall back again. There was some tumultuous times in District 29. There was soon to be a vacancy, because there were some activity that was kind of forcing that to come to fruition. And so people were asking me to take the seat. And the local newspaper, like we all have one local, ran an article, but they didn't reach out to me to confirm that I was being considered to run for assembly seat, the highest Puerto Rican woman in the Democratic Party, right? So without naming names, they kind of all pointed to where I was at. And I was having a conversation with my dad, and it was October then, right? And we had to file that March. I think that was kind of the trajectory of that time frame. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm not going to run. And he's like, but why are you not going to run? And so my dad knew, right, that I was always like knocking on doors for everybody, helping to run campaigns, creating strategic policy, really transforming words on paper of promises into good government. And then he looked me deadpan in the face and said, if you get asked and you say no, I'm never going to forgive you. And I said, please, right? So I was like the baby in the house. I was like, you'll get over it. And then I think some of you have heard this story, but 2 weeks after that, he was struck by a car and killed. And in that time frame, I was asked again, and I won't say exactly what I said because it can't be aired publicly. And then I think, I don't recall the year, but it was a big rally, and I was watching the stage, and it was a very homogenous stage, and everybody, it's interesting because now I changed the number. Everybody was over the age of 40, because I was much younger back then, and everyone was a white male, and I said, I could sit back and make this phrase or the statement or this thought all the time, or I can throw myself into the fold and figure this out. And that's what I did. Yeah. And it was dramatic.
Wow.
And also was comforting because it was cathartic for me, because I thought it would be a very emotional process for me in a time frame when I was grieving, and I got to meet my father all over again from a different lens, because everybody knew him in the neighborhood. So knocking on doors, I was just comforted in the sense that that's why I was running for public office. If my father would have had the same opportunities I had, he would have probably been a presidential candidate today, I mean, he loved helping people. And so, and then funny because I got I kept my dad's last name even when I got married. I didn't hyphenate, and I got criticized for that during the during the primary I had no challenges. During the general, I had everyone come out of the woodwork and run against me, and I got criticized that, oh, this woman who doesn't even take her husband's name, as if it was a bad thing. But it's his name who'll be written in the history books, because I became the first woman, Puerto Rican, Latina, ever elected, and really just terrible. You guys had better representation, but it was 2007 and we didn't have a Latino voice in the Senate. Like, not because I would bring any kind of effective voice, but that there would be a voice there to say, hey, let's talk about this a little different.
I used to get assigned to sit in the back of the Senate and take notes for the votes for the Governor's Council. And I would be like, where's our representation?
That's so true.
That's right, in the back, right?
Well, I remember when you were on the Governor's Council as well. Yeah.
But I would sit back there. But my story is different. I had stops and starts. You know, at 15, I took on a cable company who decided in South Jersey they would eliminate Spanish language programming. And being near Fort Dixon McGuire, that was people's lifelines. And so all I did was raise my hand, don't even know why, and say we should do a petition drive, because companies really don't see black, white, or brown. They see green. And so my mother's beauty shop became the central location. And we had individuals signing a petition that said that they would cancel their subscription. So we were successful. I met some elected officials. I was like, oh, that was my first taste of public service. But it wasn't until later. And then I got talked into it by Senator Lesniak to run for freeholder. But that year, only women called Linda won. 3 Lindas won that year. But they said I ran a good race, and people thought I had a pretty good future. Then I was talked into running for city council. I lost. There was things that went on, but I lost. And I said I wasn't going to run again, that my future was in the background. And so I was quite happy being in governor's council for 3 Democratic governors, right? Because they went through in succession. But it wasn't until one of the assemblymen resigned quickly, and it came up that I started getting phone calls. Where do you live? Because I had worked already in Trenton over 5 years, and they wanted to know about my residency and did I live in Elizabeth or the district? And I did. And then I got the call, are you ready to run? And I was like, well, I'm doing the work now from the governor's side. Well, I think so, yes, I'll run. But I always consider myself the accidental assemblywoman. If it wasn't for an assemblyman resigning, if it wasn't that I was a person that some people supported, and then Lupe came out to support me and really brought my name up there. I wasn't an elected official. I had never won, so I was kind of, concerned that my losses would be held against me, but they weren't.
That's how many women come into, right? There's a vacancy.
Yes.
Right.
And then I don't remember this from your story, but I was supported by, I had major supporters, so I can't say that it was just, this essence of me just running and being the first.
Well, the thing is, each of us are the first in our districts, and that's hard because people think you should be perfect. I'm not perfect, and people expect so much from us. They really do.
I will say that I was absolutely supported by my county chairman.
So was I.
So my county chairman was completely supportive of the idea of my being nominated or considered for that appointment.
I don't want you to think that I wasn't supported.
No.
But
I'm just saying.
There were other women, because the fact was, in the 20th district, up until that time, there had never been a woman or a person of color.
Right.
Oh, wow.
And so
Wow.
it was so important.
What year is this?
2008. I came in.
A year after you.
I came in 9 months after you.
Okay.
Because it was the vote was in August before the Obama II convention.
And there was a lot of discussions around Legislative District 20 during the redistricting and the number of Latinos in the representation, and the fact that it was represented by 3 white members, and considering the number of Latinos in your district, that was a huge, huge discussion. I remember when I spoke before testified before the Apportionment Commission on the redistricting issue, and spoke about LD 20 at the time, the legislative district of, and obviously, there were.
That's interesting. So that was right before I got in,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then I spoke on redistricting when it was time to bring you up into the Senate
Yes.
seat. That's amazing.
It is. I mean,
Well,
I had no idea that common story, because I spoke for other districts, but I do remember constantly you saying it should be more than just one person
Absolutely.
and you were such a strong advocate for that.
But
And
that was
we
later.
were all
Yeah, that was
talking
later.
about that.
Senator Poe is the one for the caucus who brought in all the experts to look at the whole map,
Right.
which I
Yeah,
thought was
yeah,
fascinating,
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
because each of us has a different district with different numbers,
Right.
and just to see that map and have it overlaid to what was currently and what was projected. I
So
thought was
we
great.
had at the time, what you're talking about is the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Council, right,
From New York.
right, from New York came in. We had there were a number of different, information and how it was going to really make an impact, and how that population was going to shift. And we talked about the various different possibilities that exist out there. So it was a very interesting time. But I do remember now that you've
Because
mentioned
that
that.
was later.
That
Because
was
what year was that then? When you, right before you came in?
2010,
Right.
11,
Must be 10.
right,
Yeah.
right. So so that's yeah. So it's it's interesting
And when
how
you
our
came
path.
in, is it okay? Because I'm gonna. When you. So how old were you when you came into? Well, you were already down there, so you knew
I
the whole
was
thing.
older. Yeah, well, actually, Speaker Roberts was surprised. He walked me through, and he goes, everybody. I'm like, I've been in governor's council 5.5 years. I've worked with everybody.
Right. So you had that. Because when I came in, I felt I was the baby.
You're brand new, honey.
I went and I bought all these these terrible looking suits, right? Like, what is a senator supposed to look like? And women have had these conversations in different spaces of where they work, where you go in and you feel like you have to fit a certain mold. And I
Certain
did that
look,
for a
that's
little
right.
while. It was a short and wild, and then after I figured,
Trust me,
people
honey,
know.
your fashion is well.
But then I said I have to be
broke
me.
it.
I have
Yeah.
to be me. But it's something that a lot of women go through in a lot of different spaces, and I think in political circles now that's kind of shedding away. But that was not necessarily the case. Or if you don't have like a cohort of people to really support your individual self. Because it's called imposter syndrome, right? You feel like you have to lend yourself to the ideology of what people expect an elected official would look like.
Well, the whole thing about what an elected official should look like. I walked those halls for many years, and no one stopped me because no one thought someone that looked like me could possibly be an elected official.
Right.
So I just walked.
So
As long as I didn't have a staffer next to me, I was gold.
They would always shake Mary's hello, and I was like, that's not Ruiz. I am.
Talk about that. But I want to just make a real quick statement on that. It's so funny because when I remember I said I was the first woman in the 35th legislative district to ever be elected to office or even run I was a candidate at the time. So of course, my name was known because of my municipal involvement and my municipal employment. So they knew me. However, I had very long hair back then, very similar to yours, Reporters goes to show you how how different it is between a man and a woman. Talk about fashion and what politics will bring out. One of the reporters I remember to this day say, "Gee, I find that you are really becoming a lot more conservative these days. Do you think that that's something that's happening because you're running for office?" And I'm like, no.
I just put my hair
I just
up.
put my hair up.
Exactly. It was so ironic. It was so funny. But, just similar type of situations, you just don't realize, that that's happening, and it just hits you, So I'm like, gee. So my response, I said, did you ever ask one of my male colleagues how they changed their hairstyle or anything? And he laughed, of course, and, made a joke out of it.
Oh, I was told I should smile more. It would make me more approachable.
Oh, you're not approachable?
Evidently, the person felt comfortable enough to approach me, but smiling more. And then Steve happened to walk down the hall, and I was like, "You ever ask him if he smiles?"
Oh.
Latinas have had leadership positions and have been successful chairs. You chaired
Appropriations when I was in the assembly.
And you chaired education. I chaired a few committees. So the fact is now you actually see us in leadership roles. And the fact is we have a very diverse portfolio. We are not a one-issue legislators, I should say. And I think people have now realized that we really do our homework, and we have lots of varied interests, and we work the process.
And I think that the arc. I'm sorry.
No,
I think that the arc hasn't been a change in us. These are issues that we were. I could speak to a caucus meeting where I was trying to do the first version of the Dreamers Bill, and it was a Democratic governor, and it was a Democratic Assembly and a Democratic Senate, and I could not count to 5 with the supporters in the room. So the arc and the change hasn't come from the work that we've individually done. It has come from growth from our colleagues, a change in the front office, and a willingness and leadership to do things that sometimes are not popular as far as votes per se or polls per se. That's where for me the change has been, because we all have been working on these issues since we first came into office. It's just taken a decade to get them signed.
Yeah, and I do think that to along with what you're both saying, we certainly have lend our voices in caucus loud and clear on a lot of these issues as well, so that has also been an opportunity and an engine to almost start up these conversations, even when those conversations are less likely to take place, but we kind of put them out there and make them become a part of the conversation, not just.
And it's great to have each other.
Yeah.
Because you need that.
You talked about leadership. I just want to, how we evolved. Here I'm looking at the conference leader right over here to my left, and the Senate President Pro Tem. I mean, talk about strong leadership in terms of where Latinas and where we have come. I mean, one of the things that I am so proud of whenever I travel across the country, especially now in my new role. One of the things that it was pointed out to me was that New Jersey has right now the leading female legislators in the state. So we have 9 women out of our 10 members of the Latino caucus. All 9 of them are women. 9 out of the 10. So we have the leading number of Latina women in the legislature when you compare the percentage across,
And many of us chairing, if not in leadership roles, chairing committees.
And they're vice chairing too.
Yeah. So it's a good.
It's a good start.
Yeah, it's a good start.
It's a good start. Because I don't know what your experience was, but when we first tried to do that, it was last year. It was the last budget that Corzine had, I think. when we were trying to do the first version of the Dreamers Bill. I just thought it was common sense approach. I mean, you talk to these children who only know New Jersey as their home and find out that they're undocumented only when they're going to fill out a FAFSA form or when they're going to fill out their application for a driver's license. These are children that sat alongside each one of my colleagues in their public schools whose parents contribute to the economic growth of this state. So, and it was me being naive that we would be able to do this and got such pushback. And then that was when Obama was running at that time, and Florida came into the mix so strong, and Latino voices came into the mix so strong. And then the conversation completely shifted amongst colleagues. I felt that there was a willingness, but then the administration changed. And so it was difficult. We could get a bill done, but we weren't necessarily going to get it signed.
Right.
Why do I think it's so important? When you think about changing the trajectory of a human being's life, it's affording them an opportunity to create and grow wealth. We don't talk about that enough. It's not about equality. It's about creating equitable platforms where a person who has obstacles can actually say, I can have a running start. Now, whether you choose to take place in that race is your own individual choice, but we have to fulfill the promise of every God-given potential that is embedded in a human being. We don't do that enough. And to me, it's common sense, but we don't do it enough. And you know, for me, it always goes back to education. Education is the greatest civil rights conversation we should be having now. New Jersey ranks #1 in the country for public school systems, and you know that's not a truth, and you know that's not a truth, and I know that's not a truth. But we still want to get up and give rounds of applause as if it's not a truth until every single child is afforded those opportunities. And that includes that the Dreamers Act too. So you have a child who's doing the right thing, who's going to a good school system, and yet when they were going to apply for, and I remember using these words exactly to the caucus, I said, so it's okay. It's okay that you don't want to offer them, because at the time it wasn't even financial aid. It was just offering them the in-state tuition value, right? And it wasn't that you couldn't go to a higher ed institution. It was that it was ransom. You were just really being put in another category, and if you could throw down the bucks, you could afford to make your way. And that's how this government in this country is structured, and we have to move away from creating policy that has the haves and the have-nots, and I think removing that barrier just really sets a more equitable playing field for individuals to grow wealth. And that's where, we have to still circle back, and I know I get like heated about that, but it's about growing wealth, and we don't talk about that enough. We just don't. We do piecemeal, like there's a little bit of equality. It's not that. Give me my platform where I can launch my own trajectory and make sure that it's at the same level and the same height and the same way, that if I work just as hard as my counterpart, that I can get to the same place that you can.
Right. Wow.
Sorry.
That goes to show you when I talk about how leadership, talk about, just listen, I mean, the passion and the passion that she just spoke about is what we often hear in our caucus and the debate. So it's always an interesting thing. But I know with the driver's license, you were a real key.
A long time too.
Yes.
The driver's license started, and this is what most people don't know, in Roselle, New Jersey, with a meeting with the Latino Hispanic members of the community, right? Senator Lesniak, then Assemblyman Cryan, and myself. And the fact was, I was the only one that could speak to the community in the language they understood. So we had a discussion, and their priority was driver's license. And because of that discussion, I didn't really know enough about driver's license, I'll be honest. But because of that discussion and how they told me they can't get to work, they can't get to school, if there is an emergency, a taxi, how long does a taxi take? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, it's a driver's license just to drive a car. Nothing else. And then I started to research, and I know the caucus did research on the driver's license. But what was interesting was going to the conferences, the national conferences, talking to other legislators, how they got it passed in their states. And we use California as the model. I flew to California and met with the legislator, the assemblyman that started the bill there, to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we wouldn't repeat that here. It took years. We went from a privilege card to a driver's license because we saw that California got the driver's license and how they did it. And it was with a broad-based coalition of advocates, supporters, of course, my colleagues in both houses. But it took years, and it took a lot of fine-tuning. And I appreciate that the members of the caucus let me lead it, because we went word by word sometimes on that bill. And if you had too many, hands in that, we might not have been able to finish it. I feel bad that I still was not able to get the re-entry piece in on time because the bill had to go in December. But I was happy that not only I kept on seeing the driver's license bill, not just for the immigrants or the undocumented, but it was for all. So we were able to put the LGBTQIA group in, so now they can have an X-gender option. We were able to help domestic violence survivors. And so the thing is, there's other groups that need more assistance with a driver's license. So it's not over yet. There is a part 2. But the fact was, there's so many people that just need a driver's license. And I was shocked, really shocked, at a lot of the pushback that I got. I don't know about you guys.
Live your life, yo. Vive la vida, cógelo suave. A tu mundo oscuro, dale color, que esa es la clave. Y gózate un poquito, tito.